I've always prided myself on noticing the little things. The way the light catches my wife's hair in the morning, the faint hum of our old refrigerator, the rhythm of her footsteps when she comes home from work. My name's Daniel, and for 12 years, I've built a life with Sarah that felt like a quiet masterpiece. Imperfect? Sure, but ours. We live in a modest house on the edge of Portland, surrounded by pines that whisper secrets when the wind blows. She's a graphic designer, I'm a carpenter, and together we've carved out something steady. Or so I thought. Started with the phone. Not the calls themselves, but how she held it. Sarah used to leave it on the kitchen counter, screen up, buzzing with notifications from her sister or her boss. But one Tuesday in late February, I noticed her clutching it like a lifeline, tilting it away when I leaned over to kiss her cheek. "Just work stuff," she said, her voice a little too bright, her hazel eyes darting to the side. I didn't press her. I'm not the jealous type, or I wasn't, back then. The next clue was the scent. I'm good with smells. It's part of my trade. Wood has its own language, pines sharp, cedars warm, oaks heavy. Sarah always smelled like lavender lotion, a soft cloud that followed her around. But one evening, as she slipped off her coat after a late meeting, I caught something else. Musk, leather, something foreign, clinging to her like a shadow. She brushed past me, muttering about deadlines, and I stood there, sniffing the air like a hound, my chest tightening. I started paying attention. Her late nights at the office multiplied, 2 a week, then 3. She'd come home with her hair slightly mussed, her blouse wrinkled in odd places, her laughter too loud when I asked how her day went. I'd sit at our oak dining table, tracing the grain with my calloused fingers, and wonder if I was imagining it. But the signs kept piling up like sawdust. A receipt for a coffee shop she never mentioned, a new necklace I hadn't bought her, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then came the name, Ryan. She dropped it casually one night, stirring soup on the stove. Oh, Ryan was hilarious today, kept the whole team laughing. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. Ryan, I asked, keeping my tone light. New guy at work, she said, not looking up. He's a consultant. Real character. Something about the way she said it. Too quick, too rehearsed. Stuck in my throat like a splinter. I didn't know Ryan yet, but I already hated him. I'm not a man who jumps to conclusions. I build things, tables, chairs, homes, and I know every joint needs to fit just right before you call it solid. So I watched. I waited. Sarah's habits shifted like seasons, slow at first, then undeniable. She started wearing perfume again, the kind she hadn't touched since our dating days. Something sharp and floral, like she was announcing herself to someone new. Her phone stayed glued to her hand, and once, when I walked into the living room, she slammed it face down on the couch so fast I thought it might crack. I needed proof, not because I wanted to believe it, but because I couldn't stop the gnawing in my gut. One night, while she showered, I picked up her phone. She changed the passcode, used to be our anniversary 0612, but now it rejected me. I stared at the screen, my reflection a ghost in the black glass, and felt my pulse hammer. When she came out, towel-wrapped and humming, I asked, "Why'd you change your code?" She blinked, then laughed. "Privacy, Dan. Work stuff's sensitive now." Her lie was smooth, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. The next day, I followed her. I took the afternoon off, claiming a dentist appointment, and trailed her silver Honda from her office. She didn't go home. She drove to a brick building downtown, a sleek, modern place with tinted windows. I parked across the street, slouched in my truck, and watched her step out, her heels clicking on the pavement. A man met her at the door, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a grin that made my fists clench. Ryan, I assumed. They disappeared inside, and I sat there for 2 hours, the engine ticking as it cooled, my mind spinning. I dug deeper. Her laptop was still fair game. She hadn't locked that yet. Late one night, while she slept, I opened it on our kitchen table. Her email was a mess of work threads, but one name kept popping up. Ryan Kessler. "Great meeting you today," he wrote in one. "Dinner soon," said another. No replies from her, but the timestamps matched her late nights. Then I found the photos, buried in a folder labeled Work Inspo. There they were, Sarah and Ryan at some rooftop bar, her head tilted toward him, his arm brushing hers. My throat burned. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I'm a patient man, too patient, maybe. I kept building, kept sanding down the edges of my anger, waiting for the moment it'd fit into something I could use. But the truth was a weight I couldn't shake. Sarah was slipping away, and Ryan Kessler was the magnet pulling her. I started researching him. A quick search online showed he was real. Ryan Kessler, 38, freelance consultant, ex-model turned creative strategist. His Instagram was a parade of smug selfies and city skylines, captioned with nonsense like, "Living the dream." I wanted to smash my screen. The betrayal wasn't just the act, or whatever they were doing behind those tinted windows. It was the lies. The way she'd come home and kiss me like nothing had changed. One night, she curled up next to me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, and I smelled that musk again. I asked, "How's Ryan doing?" Casual as I could manage. She stiffened, just for a second, then laughed. "Oh, he's fine. Busy guy." I nodded, staring at the TV, my mind carving out a plan. I followed them again. This time they went to a hotel, a boutique place with ivy crawling up the walls. I watched from my truck as they walked in, her hand grazing his back. They didn't come out for hours. I sat there, the streetlights buzzing overhead, and felt something harden inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was rage, cold and precise, like a blade I'd sharpen later. Back home, I started collecting evidence. I borrowed a friend's old camera, the kind with a zoom lens, and snapped photos the next time they met. Sarah in a red dress I'd never seen. Ryan leaning close, their laughter floating through the cracked window of my truck. I printed the pictures, hid them in my workshop under a stack of blueprints. Every night, I'd look at them, letting the hurt turn into something else. Here's where it gets strange. I didn't just want proof. I wanted to understand. So I went to the source. Ryan had a public schedule on his website, touting consulting sessions at a co-working space downtown. I signed up using a fake name, Mark Evans, and showed up in a baseball cap and jeans. He didn't know me, but I knew him. Up close, he was slicker than I'd imagined. Polished shoes, a handshake too firm, a voice that dripped charm. He talked about branding and vision, but I barely listened. I was studying him, mapping the man who'd taken my wife. Then he said something that stopped me cold. My inspiration? Real people. Like Sarah. Met her at a gig a few months back. She's got this energy, you know? The room laughed, but I didn't. He was flaunting her, right there in front of me. I nodded along, my jaw tight, and slipped out early. But not before I overheard him invite the group to an exclusive event that weekend. Sarah would be there, I knew it. I went. It was a loft party, all exposed brick and dim lights, packed with artsy types sipping overpriced wine. I lingered in the shadows, watching. Sarah arrived in that red dress, her laugh cutting through the chatter. Ryan was beside her, his hand on her elbow, guiding her like she was his. But then I saw it, the unusual part. Another woman joined them, blonde and sharp-eyed, kissing Ryan on the mouth while Sarah watched, unbothered. They were a trio, a tangled knot of affection I couldn't untangle. My wife wasn't just with him. She was part of something bigger, something I hadn't foreseen. I drove home that night with my head spinning. Sarah wasn't just cheating. She was living a life I didn't recognize, a world of shared glances and secret rules. The blonde, I learned later, was Mia, a photographer Ryan worked with. The three of them moved like a unit, their closeness a slap in my face. I sat in my workshop, the photos spread out, and realized this wasn't a fling. It was a betrayal so deep it rewrote our history. I stopped pretending. When Sarah came home the next day, I didn't ask about her night. I just watched her, silent and cold. She noticed. "You okay, Dan?" she asked, her voice thin. "Fine," I said, and left it there. But inside, I was forging something cruel. Revenge wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel what I felt, to lose what I'd lost. And I knew how. Ryan's career was his pride, his brand built on charisma and connections. Sarah's job relied on her reputation, clean, professional, reliable. Mia's photography gigs came through the same circles. I'd hit them all, not with fists or shouts, but with something sharper. I started digging emails, social media, anything I could find. I called in favors, talked to old clients, pieced together their world. And I found it, a thread to pull, a way to unravel them. The cruelty was in the precision. I wouldn't just expose them. I'd dismantle their lives, brick by brick, until they had nothing left to hold on to. It'd take time, but I had plenty of that now. Sarah slept beside me that night, oblivious, while I stared at the ceiling, my mind a blueprint of ruin. I'm a man who works with his hands, but this wasn't about hammers or nails. It was about precision, about finding the weak spots in their shiny little lives. Sitting in my workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and the hum of a fluorescent bulb, I mapped it out. Ryan Kessler, Sarah, and Mia. They weren't just a trio of tangled hearts. They were a fragile ecosystem, held together by ego and ambition. I tear it apart from the roots. First, I needed more. Evidence wasn't enough, I wanted leverage. I'd already cracked Sarah's laptop, but her phone was still a locked vault. So I got creative. I bought a cheap burner phone and a voice recorder, small enough to hide in my pocket. The next time she left for one of her late nights, I slipped the recorder into her purse, tucked inside a ripped seam she'd never notice. She came home at midnight, her cheeks flushed, and I retrieved it while she slept. The audio was a goldmine. Ryan's voice, smooth and cocky, calling her babe, Mia laughing in the background. Plans for a weekend getaway. My stomach churned, but I listened again, transcribing every word. Ryan's weakness was his image. He thrived on being the golden boy. Clients adored him. His social media was a shrine to his charm. I started there. Using a fake account, Jake Miller, a name I pulled from thin air. I followed his posts, his clients, his network. He'd bragged about a big contract with a local ad agency, some trendy firm called Vortex Media. I knew a guy there, Tom, from a carpentry job years back. I called him up, casual as anything. Heard you're working with Ryan Kessler, I said. What's he like? Tom spilled enough. Ryan was flashy, unreliable, late with deliverables. Perfect. Sarah's vulnerability was her job. She'd climbed the ladder at her design firm, built a name for herself. But she'd always been paranoid about her reputation. Any hint of scandal and she'd crumble. Mia, I learned, was the wild card. Her photography gigs were tied to Ryan's connections. Without him, she'd flounder. I had my targets. Now I needed the tools. I started small, testing the waters. Vortex Media was my opening move. I met Tom for coffee, brought along a folder of research, screenshots of Ryan's flirty messages to Sarah, timestamps matching his supposed work hours, a few vague hints from the recorder. I didn't say it was my wife, just a source I'd stumbled across. Thought you should know who you're dealing with, I said, sliding it across the table. Tom's eyebrows shot up. This guy's a liability, he muttered, flipping through. Thanks, Dan. 2 days later, Ryan posted a cryptic rant on Instagram. Some people don't get loyalty. Moving on to bigger things. I smiled into my coffee. Vortex had dropped him. I confirmed it with Tom over a quick call. Strike one. Ryan's ego took the hit, but he'd recover unless I kept pushing. So I did. Next, I turned to Sarah's world. Her firm had a strict policy about personal conduct. Nothing explicit, just a vague uphold professionalism clause. I drafted an anonymous email from concerned colleague, attached a grainy photo of her and Ryan at that rooftop bar, and sent it to her boss. I didn't accuse, just hinted. Not sure this aligns with company values. I used a VPN, a trick I'd learned from a tech-savvy buddy to cover my tracks. Sarah came home that night rattled, muttering about a weird meeting at work. They're overreacting, she said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, silent, my pulse steady. Mia was trickier. I didn't have direct access, but I knew her next gallery show was coming up. A big deal, sponsored by Ryan's Contacts. I get to that later. For now, I watched the cracks form. My hands steady as I planed a piece of walnut in my shop, the rhythm calming my fury. The recorder became my ally. I planted it again, this time in Sarah's car, wedged under the passenger seat. She drove to meet them the next night, and I listened to the fallout. Ryan was furious about Vortex, his voice tight. "Someone's screwing with me, Sarah. You hear anything?" She sounded nervous, deflecting. "Maybe it's just bad luck." Mia chimed in, sharp. "Or someone knows something." They were paranoid now, turning on each other. Good. I upped the ante. Ryan's next gig was a speaking slot at a creative conference. Another chance to strut. I found the organizer's email online and sent a tip, still as Jake Miller. I attached a doctored clip from the recorder. Ryan bragging about faking his credentials. A lie I'd stitched together with audio scraps. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. The organizer canceled him within hours, citing scheduling conflicts. Ryan's next post was a meltdown. "Cowards everywhere. I'll rise above." His followers lapped it up, but I saw the desperation. Sarah's firm called her in again. She came home pale, her hands trembling as she poured wine. "They're investigating me," she whispered. "Some stupid rumor." I played dumb, stirring the pot roast I'd made. "That's rough," I said, my voice flat. She didn't suspect me, not yet. But the tension was eating her alive, and I savored it, quiet as I set the table. Mia's turn was brewing. I'd found her gallery sponsor, a boutique wine brand Ryan had hooked her up with. A quick call to their PR guy, posing as a concerned vendor, dropped enough doubt about her reliability. "She's tied to that Kessler guy," I said. "Might want to check his rep." They didn't cut her yet, but the seed was planted. The trio's dynamic was crumbling, and I saw it firsthand. I tailed them to a bar one night, the recorder running in Sarah's purse. Ryan was drunk, snapping at Mia. "You're not helping, just whining." Sarah tried to mediate, her voice thin. "Let's just calm down." Mia fired back. "You're the one who dragged me into this mess." I leaned against my truck, listening through earbuds, and realized their bond wasn't love. It was convenience, fraying under pressure. That's when I found the twist. Digging through Ryan's old posts, I stumbled on a comment from a woman named Lisa. Bitter. Cryptic. "Hope your new friends know what I did." I tracked her down on LinkedIn. Lisa Carter, ex-girlfriend, dumped by Ryan years back. I reached out, posing as a journalist researching consulting scams. She was eager to talk. "He's a leech," she said over the phone. "Used me, then ghosted me. Same with his little posse now." She sent me files, texts, photos, proof he'd swindled clients. Jackpot. I leaked it. Not all at once, but in drips. A burner account posted Lisa's screenshots on X, tagging Ryan's clients. Another sent them to Sarah's firm, hinting at her involvement. Mia's sponsor got a copy too, with a note about her associates. The fallout was instant. Ryan lost 2 more gigs, Sarah faced a formal review, and Mia's show got postponed. They were bleeding, and I hadn't even shown my face. Sarah cracked first. She came home late, eyes red, and collapsed on the couch. "It's falling apart, Dan," she sobbed. "Work, everything." I sat across from her, hands folded, and asked, "What happened?" She spilled half-truths, stress, rumors, no mention of Ryan or Mia. I nodded, letting her dig her hole. "We'll get through it," I said, my voice a mask. She didn't know I was the storm. Ryan was next. His Instagram went silent, then erupted with a rant. "Betrayed by snakes. I'll be back." His followers dwindled. Mia's show was officially canceled. I saw the email in her inbox, hacked via a phishing link I'd sent. The trio was imploding, and I sat in my workshop, sharpening my next move. Revenge wasn't done, it was just beginning. I spent weeks weaving a net, and now it was time to pull it tight. My workshop became my war room. Photos, notes, and recordings pinned to a corkboard, hidden behind a tarp. Sarah barely noticed. She was a ghost in our house, pacing the kitchen or staring at her phone. waiting for salvation that wouldn't come. Ryan and Mia were unraveling too. I tracked their posts, their silence, their desperation. The trio's collapse was my symphony, and I was ready to play the last notes. I went after Ryan's core. He'd bragged about a mentorship program he ran, some overpriced scam for young creatives. Lisa's files gave me the ammo. Fake testimonials, inflated results, money siphoned into his personal account. I packaged it all, screenshots, bank records, her bitter annotations, and sent it to the local press, anonymous, with a tip. Portland's golden boy isn't so golden. The story broke 2 days later, a small online outlet at first, then picked up by bigger names. Creative consultant exposed as fraud. The headline screamed. Ryan's phone must have lit up with cancellations. His mentorship page went offline by noon. Sarah's firm was next. The investigation I'd sparked had stalled. Her boss liked her too much, so I pushed harder. I'd kept one recording back, a juicy one. Sarah giggling with Ryan about borrowing a client's design idea. I cleaned it up, made it anonymous, and mailed a USB to her HR department, labeled confidential. The call came that afternoon. She stumbled in, ashen, muttering about a disciplinary hearing. "They might fire me, Dan," she whispered. I rubbed her shoulder, my face a mask of concern, my heart cold as stone. Mia's ruin was simpler. Her canceled show had left her scrambling, so I nudged her sponsor again. Another fake email, this time with a doctored invoice showing she'd overcharged them, tied to Ryan's mess. They cut her loose, and her Instagram turned into a pity party. Lost everything. Thanks, universe. I sipped my coffee, watching the dominoes fall. Sarah broke on a Thursday. She sat me down at the dining table, hands trembling, and confessed. Half of it, anyway. "I've been seeing someone," she said, eyes on the floor. "Ryan, it's over now. But I messed up." No mention of Mia. No depth. Just a shallow plea for forgiveness. I leaned back, arms crossed, and let her squirm. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady. "A few months," she lied. I knew it was longer. "Why?" She stammered about stress, attention, things I hadn't given her. I nodded, slow, like I was buying it. "You're not mad?" she asked, confused. I smiled, thin and sharp. "I've had time to think," I said. She didn't know what that meant. Not yet. I let her stew, her relief fragile, while I finalized the endgame. Ryan was calling her nonstop. I saw on her phone later. She'd left it unlocked for once. He was panicking, begging her to fix this. Mia had texted too, furious. "You both ruined me." The trio was a tangle of blame, and I stood above it, pulling strings. I met Ryan the next day, not as Daniel, but as Jake Miller, the shadow I'd built. I emailed him, pretending to be a client with a lucrative offer, and set a meeting at a dingy cafe. He showed up disheveled, hair greasy, shirt wrinkled, eyes darting. "You Jake?" he asked, voice rough. I nodded, cap low, and slid him a fake proposal, busy work to keep him talking. He rambled about his comeback, oblivious, while I studied the man who'd taken my life apart. I left early, promising to follow up. I wouldn't. The press story spread like wildfire. Ryan's clients bailed, his reputation ash. I fed the flames, more leaks, more tips, all anonymous. A former mentee sued him, citing Lisa's evidence. He was done, a pariah in Portland's creative scene. Sarah's hearing came and went. She kept her job, but they demoted her, stripped her title. She cried in our bedroom, oblivious to my role, while I sanded a chair downstairs, the rhythm soothing my rage. Mia vanished from the grid, no posts, no gigs. I heard through a mutual friend she'd moved back to Seattle, tail between her legs. Their world was rubble, but they didn't know why. That was the cruelty. I wasn't done. I wanted them to see me, to understand. So I planned the reveal. It started with a package. I mailed it to Ryan's apartment. Photos of him and Sarah, the rooftop bar, the hotel, paired with printouts of his ruined deals. A note, typed, "You took what wasn't yours. Now look." I sent Sarah a copy too, slipped into her work bag, with a twist, recordings of her lies, her laughs with him, and a single line, "I know everything." Mia got hers last. Images of the trio, her cancelled show notice, and a jab. "You picked the wrong team." The fallout was instant. Sarah found hers first. Came home screaming, "Who did this?" I played dumb, watching her unravel. "Someone's out to get me," she sobbed. Ryan called her, frantic. I heard his voice through the phone, accusing her of leaking it. She denied it, crying harder. Mia texted her too. A venomous, "You set us up." They turned on each other, a snake pit of paranoia, and I sat back, silent, waiting. I couldn't resist the final blow. I called Ryan, this time as me, Daniel, the husband. "Meet me," I said, voice low. "Park by the river, 8 p.m. He hesitated, then agreed, probably thinking he could charm his way out. I got there early, stood by the water, the air cold and damp. He pulled up, stepped out, and froze when he saw me. "You're Sarah's husband?" he stammered. I didn't waste words. "You took my wife," I said, tossing the photos at his feet. "I took your life." His face went slack as it clicked. The leaks, the ruin, me. "You're insane," he spat, but his hands shook. I stepped closer, voice calm. "You're nothing now. Remember that." He swung at me wild, sloppy. I dodged, let him stumble, and walked away. He didn't follow. Sarah was next. I waited till she came home, the package still clutched in her hands. "It was you," she whispered, eyes wide. I nodded. "You lied for months, played me. Now you've got nothing." She begged, tears streaming, "Sorry, so sorry," but I was stone. "Pack your things," I said. She didn't move, just sank to the floor, broken. I left her there, walked to my truck, and drove into the night. They're gone now. Sarah moved out a week later, crashing with her sister, her career a shadow. Ryan left Portland. Last I heard, he's bartending somewhere up north, a ghost of his old self. Mia's off the map, her dreams dust. I stayed in the house, rebuilt it piece by piece, new floors, new walls, erasing her scent. The workshop's my sanctuary, the hum of tools my peace. I don't regret it. They took my trust, my home, my quiet life. I took their pride, their futures, their everything. People ask if I'm okay, and I nod, carving a table or a chair, my hand steady. The revenge was cruel, yes, but it was mine, built with the same care I put into wood. I sleep alone now, the pines whispering outside, and for the first time in months, I feel whole.